Hello, ladies and gentlemen. Welcome to Film Prods for myself, Matt, and my two co-hosts, Mark
Hello.
and Tyler,
Hello.
provide completely unprofessional, 100% biased opinions on the movies of today, tomorrow, and yesteryear. But before we get into our movie discussion, we have some updates. Tyler, take it away, because I probably forgot what they are.
It's like, I blanked for half a second. I really panicked. Basically, we're all going to be busy. School, life, jobs are starting up again. So we've been kind of like no schedule whatsoever uploading. It's basically been like every 3 or 4 days we put out a podcast. But basically, now we have to plan around when we actually have free time like real adults, and that's horrifying. So we're going to do once a week, and it's going to be once a week no matter what. Even if one of us isn't able to make it, it'll either be just two of us or we'll put in a guest. But it's going to be most likely on Sunday we'll release an episode. So we're going to continue with the same kind of stuff we have. We recommend a director's series or a new movie coming out, but it's ultimately going to be once a week. If we have more free time, we'll put out more, but for the foreseeable future, that's what's going to be. There's also Jeff Davidson, who is one of our best commenters and #1 fans, asked a while back if we could split the videos into our regular reviews and our what we've been watching section. Just due to time constraints, we got to put them back together again. But specifically talking to Jeff Davidson, if you go to our description, there's always timestamps. So if you don't want to hear us talk about the movie we're talking about, just click on the timestamp for the what we've been watching section, and that will bring you to that. Also, if you have any movies you want us to check out and review, put it in the comments. Maybe if we have time, we'll be able to watch them and do a review on them. But if you have anything you're like, man, these guys should really talk about, insert this classic movie. I'd love to hear their
My Little Ponies, Big Adventure.
Yes, if you want to hear us become bronies, put it right there. Yeah, I know. Not my ideal thing, but we're willing to.
He's more of a furry.
I'm more of a furry. Yes, that's now on record. But that's now. If you guys want to,
we will be reviewing Zootopia once a week from now on.
Scene by scene. That's our new podcast. But
okay. Yeah.
Recommend us stuff. We might get a chance to check them out. We'll see. But we want you guys to have the option to recommend stuff.
Yeah.
So
don't hold your breath, though.
Don't hold your breath, because Matt's a vindictive tyrant, and he won't let us do anything outside of our schedule.
We're only talking about philosophical Catholic movies and South Korean films.
I love it. All right, Matt. What movie? Wait, no, it's my thing.
Tyler, this is your recommendation.
This is my recommendation.
Can take it away though, if you want me to.
I'll do a quick little introduction. I recommended the 2018 movie Burning. It's another South Korean movie, because we're now the South Korean film prods. It's a 2018 movie directed by Lee Chang-dong. It is a really interesting movie, but I'm very, very curious to see what you guys think. I already have an idea of what Matt thinks about the movie, but because this movie isn't something that we can be heavily theorized about, and we can do an entire podcast about what this movie is about, but we're going to start off talking about the filmmaking and stuff like that. So, Mark.
Yeah, and spoilers throughout. We're not.
Spoilers, yeah.
Yeah, but there really is nothing to spoil, because it's all to your interpretation.
It's all, all interpretation. But, Mark, tell us about this movie, what you thought about it, first time you watched it, all the whole 9 yards.
Yeah. I watched it for the first time last night. And basically, I liked it. I wasn't like totally swept off my feet. There's a lot to take in. There's a lot to take in. It sort of felt like I'm going to compare it to Tarkovsky real quick. Sorry. Tarkovsky does, these slow, long takes, philosophical, methodical films that I absolutely adore. This felt of that essence, but it was an entirely different thing. I wouldn't say I would. I wasn't, as I said, totally swept away. I liked it. The more I think about it, the more I sort of like it. It's like one of those movies where you see it once and you're like, I need to rewatch that again, because there's a whole new meaning each time you watch it. So, strong like for me. I'm excited for this discussion because I think there's a lot of stuff I missed out on, and I'm curious to see how it compares to the Murakami story that I know you've read, Tyler.
Yeah.
I read it too yesterday.
You read it too?
Yeah.
Oh, how short is it?
It's
like
20
13 pages.
Yeah, it's not a lot.
Oh, okay.
It's also, Matt, this is your second time watching it. What did you think?
So I was the first one to see it out of all of us. I don't really know how I come across these movies, to be honest. Like all these South Korean movies that I watch, they just like fall into my lap, and I'm like, oh, this looks interesting. And I think I was talking to my friend from school. She really likes South Korean movies as well, and she was like, "Oh, this movie Burning looks good," and then she saw it. She's like, "Screw this movie, I hate it." And I was like, "I kind of want to watch it now," and so I did, and I was sort of mixed on it. And I remember talking to her. It was just funny because there's a lot of stuff I liked about it, but she was pretty like volatile towards it. And so I watched it, and I recommended it to Tyler. And then a year later, when Tyler finally stopped listening to my recommendations, he watched it as well. And I think the movie is more interesting to talk about than the movie itself. Like, I'm really looking forward to this conversation. I respect this movie and how like kind of bold it is, where it really doesn't give you any clear explanation to what's going on. And a lot of it's kind of up to your interpretation. But upon rewatch, I enjoyed the first half a lot more. I felt the second half sort of struggled a bit, knowing where it was going to go. Tyler, what are your opinions
All right.
on it?
So this is gonna be a lot. I'm gonna have to ramble for half a second. I love this movie. This is the exact kind of reason why I love movies, and I should also want to harken back to the end of our Prometheus review, where I threw out the idea of the difference between the movies posing franchise questions versus just philosophical questions. Where the difference is a franchise question wants the audience to go see the next installment of whatever there is, and the philosophical questions is leading the audience to your own interpretation, trying to piece together the clues. And Prometheus has both of those. Burning is entirely a movie up to your own interpretation. There is enough there where you can formulate a kind of a base idea, but there's so much more. I've seen this movie twice. I absolutely adore everything about this movie. I got something entirely different the second time out of that when I watched it compared to the first one. I also am my favorite author is Haruki Murakami, that the short story is based off of.
Favorite author?
My favorite author, despite it's a weird relationship. He has like such a charisma and magnetism to his writing, despite me having issues with like half his books. Favorite author, I've read his barn burning story twice, but it's also based off a 1930s William Faulkner story called Barn Burning, which I haven't.
Barn Burning.
Barn
Stop
Burning.
sounding like you're from Boston.
Barn Burning. That one,
yeah, there's
really,
a movie called Barn Burning.
It really slipped out there.
Yeah, Fenway Park.
That was really natural too. That one didn't. I didn't mean to do that.
Yeah, sure. Okay.
Continue. Mark Wahlberg.
Mark Wahlberg. But yeah, it's based off a 1930s William Faulkner story called Barn Burning. And I am amazed at how accurate this movie is able to capture Murakami's writing, specifically kind of his longer works. I love everything about this movie. It's 2.5 hours long. It's incredibly inaccessible to a general audience because it's so long and it's so up to your own interpretation that recommending this to anyone who isn't kind of like a big movie fan is really tough, because you have, if you want to look at accessible, sort of like, what is it? Basically accessible to inaccessible South Korean movies. On one end, you have like Parasite, which general audiences love because there's a lot of great stuff in that. And Burning's on the opposite end, which I feel like if you show it to a general audience, no one's going to really understand or like the movie. But I absolutely adore everything about this movie. I feel like we should start by kind of breaking it into sections, because this movie is very much kind of like told into thirds. It's like 3 different kind of elements. What did you guys think? Like, I'm really curious. Like, Mark, your first time watching, you have the first hour, which is kind of like the introduction to the story, the introduction to the characters, the world. What do you think of like the first hour of the movie?
It's interesting. Well, first off, I'd like to talk about the protagonist, Jung So.
Jung Soo.
Jung Soo.
Yeah.
I don't know. It's very hard to resonate with his character for me. He just sort of felt like this. I don't want to say like blockhead or anything, but he was just very passive, and I really wasn't particularly interested in him. But like the way the world is sort of shot is very interesting. I really like the long takes that seem sort of meaningless, but it's like it feels like it serves some sort of purpose. Like I'm sorry, I'm going to talk about Tarkovsky a little bit. With Tarkovsky, I realize I love this type of filmmaking because the takes are so long, and you suddenly become like, at some point in the shot, you're like very aware, like, oh, this is a very long shot, and so you start like scanning the screen for like hints or clues as to why the shot is so long, and then you become more appreciative of the like environment, and I really like that. So I really like that aspect of the first third. And Yeah, I mean, what'd you guys think? I want to sort of bounce off you guys more because I feel like you guys got more out of this than I did.
Matt,
I found the main character to be much more dynamic the second time watching it. I thought it was a little boring. Like I didn't like despise him or anything when I first watched it, but I thought it was
Yeah.
kind of boring. I don't know. I liked how he was like a wannabe writer, and he was kind of just like sort of languid in a way. And I thought that Amy, the
Amy, yeah.
girl, she as well. I think her character comes off as much more dynamic on the second viewing. She's very This is what I didn't pick up really in the first time, and I'm kind of coming to more of a conclusion now the second time, is that she's very like, I don't know if pathetic is the right word, but she's very reliant on other people's opinions and getting attention. And I've been watching some like video essays on Burning, and no one really talks about her very much. And I think that she's a much more interesting character than a lot of video essayists are making out seem. Like they always focus on Ben and Chung Soo, but I think that her story is very tragic, and I definitely liked it a lot more on the second viewing. It's kind of changed what I think happened to her on the second viewing.
I just want to say that this is the reason why I gravitate to this so much. Is this Jung-soo very much is resonant of a typical kind of Murakami protagonist, someone who is often kind of, I think, listless is a good way to kind of describe them. They seem very passive in the way in which they go around the world, like kind of being shaped by things rather than having their own character. I think Jung-soo is a character because there's this subtext of the growing youth unemployment in South Korea. And he's a character very much shaped by that kind of lack of a goal in life. He is like a kind of a writer who can't create a story because the world is a mystery to him, as he says at the end of the movie. He's very much a character.
He says that at the beginning of the movie.
He says that in the beginning and then at the end as well when he's talking to Ben. But he's basically a character very much shaped by the context of the world. And unfortunately, that context is very much a lack of drive because no one can work and no one can find work. You see in the one job where you're kind of given a glimpse into an outside world that isn't the impoverished area of South Korea, and then the upper elite is you see them trying to find jobs like youth, and the employers are often like, can you work overtime and nights? And they're basically picking people who have the most accessibility to give their like constant time to a job. And I think Jung-soo is a perfect kind of example of that. And he's someone who doesn't have any singular motivation because he represents kind of a larger population as a whole. And I find that so engaging because he's basically faced with a mirror image of himself in Hey Me, and then he's facing like the opposite end of the spectrum with Ben. And I find that kind of dynamic and that engagement to be incredibly compelling. There's a lot we can go off of with specifically like the comparison between Jung-soo and Ben with kind of like themes of masculinity. But I feel like we can go back to Hey Me. This is actually your first ever performance. The actress
she's only done two movies.
Yeah, and first off, she's incredible in this. All the performances all around are amazing. But Hey Me is very much Jung-soo. They're very much kind of the same person. Hey Me, they don't have any friends, they don't have any money, and they don't have a purpose. Hey Me is kind of like that attempt to find something. When we can talk about kind of what happens later, but I think you're right. The story's very tragic because we're basically viewing the worst possible outcome for Jung-soo, our main protagonist for the movie is kind of framed from.
I don't think that they're like perfect mirrors. Like Amy, I think is more eager for other people's approval than Jung-soo is, and also Jung-soo kind of questions his role more in society more than Amy, because Amy's when they first talk, Amy's like, oh, I just like a job where I can get some physical exercise in, and stuff like that. And it's like, oh, I'm just gonna go to Africa because I'm trying to find because whatever. So I mean, they are similar in some ways, but I don't think that they're perfect. Like I don't think that they're mirroring characters.
I would say they're may not be mirror like I said, but their kind of ideas and core themes around them are basically they're within the same context of it. But I feel like there's a lot we can go off of. I want to like tackle the performances though and all the characters first before we start getting into like greater stuff. What do you guys think of Steven Yeun? I don't know how to pronounce it, as Ben. I think he's magnificent. I think this is his best movie, his best performance. This is now, and now this movie puts him into a realm of, if he's in something, I'm going to watch it because of him. There are little things in this movie that feel so natural that don't feel like acting. there was one scene at the end, and I think because I watched the YMS video after this because I was curious what he thought about it, and he points it out. But Ben has a scene where he like yawns and kind of like recovers and then like smiles at our protagonist, and it's just like something about that feels so natural, but it's also acting. It's really kind of weird dichotomy. I don't know what you guys thought about Steven Yeun or just everyone in general.
He was first of all, I didn't get this when I was watching it, obviously, but I watched a video after, and his name's Ben, but also his accent, his Korean accent is more American, is what I heard in a review for it. So there's like some sort of commentary on the fact that he's like this rich Korean guy, but he's not actually fully Korean. I guess he has that American sort of culture with him as well. So there's some weird commentary there and how he doesn't like quite fit in. And yeah, just like what you said, his acting is brilliant. You never, because of the whole second half of the movie is kind of circulating around whether or not he's a murderer or not.
Yep.
But you could just never tell because he's so just nice to everyone. But you're like even in the audience mind, you never fully realize like, oh, is this all just a show, or is he just like, because it makes sense for him just to be nice because he's a rich guy. Like he owns a Porsche. No one knows what he does for a job. Apparently, he just does nothing for a job, and he has all this money at the same time. I think Chung Soo compares from F. Scott Fitz to Great Gatsby.
Yep.
And so it would make sense in a way for him just to be this nice, like kind of passive guy, like whatever, let's have a party or whatever. But also at the same time, it does have that serial killer kind of implications to it, where he's so smooth and he's so calculating that maybe there has to be a dark side to him.
Mark, what do you think?
Yeah, I mean, if I said any more, I'd be, it'd be like an echo chamber in here. Yeah, I mean, I think the only time I've ever seen him act outside of this film was like The Walking Dead or something.
Yeah,
he's good in The Walking Dead.
He's good in The Walking Dead. But yeah, he's like, my whole perspective on him has changed after this film. Because I didn't know that he was in this film, and then when he showed up, I was like, oh, okay, this is gonna get interesting. And I didn't know, like, again, I don't know how great his South Korean accent was, but he has a really good American accent, and I just sort of, I was like, whoa, he's really talented. And and his performance again, you already mentioned this, Matt, but the whole like way of describing his character is like a Gatsby-like guy. It's just perfect. It's the best way to put it. So yeah, I thought his performance was fantastic.
Yeah, I want to, because we'll eventually theorize and stuff like that, but I just want to throw that there right now. I don't think he's a serial killer in any regards. But I will understand if there's evidence for. This is basically a movie of perspectives. And this is like kind of something that revealed itself to me the second time I watched it, because after the first time I was like, yeah, he killed her. I'm like, there's you absolutely did. And then you watch it again.
The first time, you mean? After
the first time, yes.
Yeah.
Sorry. And then the second time, I'm like, this is where Jung Soo's very an unreliable narrator. And
I felt the exact same way. I'm sorry.
Yeah.
Continue, but
he's very, like, we're gonna definitely theorize more, but it's very important, I feel like, to frame this movie from the perspective that we're viewing two realities. And Steven Yeun said so in an interview with the New York Film Festival. It's on YouTube, where he's like, basically, this is a movie of realities. You have Jung Soo's convinced reality that Ben's a serial killer, and then you have probably the actual reality that he's not. And there's a line in that at the beginning, because it's in the Murakami short story as well, where Hey-Mi is talking to Jung Soo about pantomime, and kind of like, once you convince yourself that something's real, it's basically hard to convince yourself it's not real. Like, once you believe something's there, it's hard to convince yourself it's not actually there. And I think that's because Murakami basically kind of does that a lot, where he just like throws little lines into the beginning of short stories, and it kind of ultimately plays as a main theme throughout the rest of the book. And that was like a line I gravitated to this second time watching it. And so I was able to watch that movie from the perspective like, yeah, this probably this probably isn't what's actually happening. Like, and that's why, Matt, you mentioned you have not a lot of issues, but issues with the second half being less interesting. And I ultimately think the second half is so engaging because you're viewing it from two kind of different perspectives, where Jung Soo is stalking Ben, but it also feels like Ben's kind of playing games with Jung Soo, because you have that one scene where he rolls down the window and then smokes, and it's just that kind of stuff like that. There's a lot of like red herrings, like, oh, you think he's rolling down the window to smoke, but there's like, he's probably messing with him. But I don't know. There's like a lot we can go off of, and I'm just gonna end up rambling a bunch throughout this. Matt, did you have any like? I feel like we should talk about the filmmaking a little bit. What did you think of kind of like the music, the directing, anything you want to talk about?
I'll talk about directing a bit. I think the directing is really good when I'm paying attention. And I'll clarify the statement. I think the first half of the movie is pretty brilliant. And I think what makes the second half less interesting is because you lose that dichotomy of the three characters interacting. Like, there's less conversations in the second half of the movie. It's more of, I think there is at least, there's more of Chung-Soo following Steven Yeun, and then also him. It's more centered around him trying to figure out if Ben killed Hae-mi. Whereas the first half is you trying to figure out what all these characters, what their situations are. Is Hae-mi with Ben, blah, blah, blah. And I think that the directing is really good there, especially, I don't know, I like the scene like when they're in the club, and you can just tell from the body language that like Chung-Soo just wants to get out of there. And Ben's it's like they're like both of them are like kind of like in the back, but Ben's like having a good time, just like watching and enjoying himself, and Chung-Soo just wants to get out.
Yep.
And then Hae-mi is dancing. So a lot of the choreography is good. And then the scene where Ben is cooking and they pan out to Hae-mi and Chung-Soo smoking, and that's when they get the Gatsby line and everything. But the movie doesn't have a lot of energy to it, so I think it was easy for me to like kind of get distracted and then not have anything to really pull me back in. I had to pull it back in on my own like mental thought, whereas compared to like a Parasite, which has a lot of energy and directing, like you're constantly reminded that things are tense, whereas in Burning you get to tell yourself things are tense, if that makes any sense. So when I'm paying attention to the movie, I think the directing's brilliant, but I think that it has a hard time keeping your interest if it starts to wander.
What do you think, Mark? Because I think this is a really interesting thing to go off of.
I think your mind wandering is part of the experience that the director wants. So Tarkovsky does.
Wants me to check Facebook.
It's
you made him lose his train of thought.
It's you get your mind is allowed to wander, and then you sort of get something happens and you're pulled back in, and your levels of engagement are constantly shifting. And I really like that style of directing. I was aware of the directing, or I guess there was periods where I wasn't aware, and then I was aware. I'd say when it was like the long shots, I'm really paying attention as to where the camera's going, what's being revealed. And then you get like a sort of like a dialogue heavy scene, or it's just any scene with Ben, and you're just sort of like, tense. And I really like that style of directing. It's I could talk in circles, but
I just need to clarify when you said that the film pulls you back in. My point was that I was dictating my own interest in the movie. It's such a weird complaint because I never really said this about any movie before.
Yeah.
Whereas you're saying that, Tarkovsky controls when you pay attention, when you don't. I was saying that in my mind, I was kind of choosing when to pay attention. Like I had to make myself pay attention, if that makes any sense. It's such a weird complaint, which I've never had before. But when I was paying attention, I was appreciating what I was seeing.
Your complaint makes sense though, because the movie is very, like, we should establish that this movie is a slow movie, and it's not a slow 90-minute movie. It's a slow 2.5-hour movie. So it's understandable when there are long sequences where it feels like nothing's happening to kind of go like, all right, and then you kind of take a step back. And I feel like a lot of that has to do with the fact that there's barely any music in this movie. Oftentimes sets and scenes are scored by like nature itself. Like there's one scene in the middle where they go to visit Jung-Soo's house, and the entirety of that scene, outside of probably the best scene in the movie, the dance scene in the sunset, it's jazz music. Miles Davis, yeah. But other than that, if you look, because there's a few times I rewound that scene a few times, because there's like cicadas playing in the back, like,
I don't know,
buzzing in the background, and there's a point where Ben goes like, oh, I like to burn greenhouses for fun. And I thought there was a little musical score because there's like a, and I was like, oh, it's a musical score. But I had to rewind it, and it's actually just a car going by. And it's like little stuff like that I think creates a really nice sense of ambiance in this movie.
There's one musical part which I don't really like, is when Chung-Soo's following Ben, and they're like plucking the guitar strings really viciously. That's like the one part where the score is like really prevalent, other than the Miles Davis scene, and don't really like. I don't hate it.
Yeah.
But I don't think it's necessary. At the same
I
time.
think I love it because it creates it's that like pluck and that like long tune, and it creates like it's like the Punch Drunk Love kind of element where it's like the background noise to create anxiety, and there's just so much, and it's that one little thing where it doesn't happen. It's not like plug plug. It's like playing, and then it resonates, and then it quiet, and then it does it again to kind of like constantly keep you in a state of anxiety. I think the music is wonderful in this when there is. Murakami is a massive fan of classical and jazz music to the point he wrote an entire book about interviewing someone about classical and jazz music. So hearing jazz music in the movie was like, that's a Murakami thing. I think this movie is masterfully directed. I'm a big proponent of like the slow shots, and I think there is enough energy in this, but where it kind of keeps you interested, where it's not a like a static shot and you characters move throughout. It's long, slow, and then the camera starts to move and rotate and go around, and I think it's very engaging. But I also understand if people don't like this movie.
Yeah.
And that's, I feel like, a really important thing. This movie's not for everyone. Matt, your friend hates this movie, and I get it. I completely get it. I don't know, like, we're not familiar. I don't know. Have you guys watched any other Lee Chang-dong movies?
I actually looked for a movie last on Amazon and Netflix, but there weren't any.
There weren't any? Okay.
Yeah.
I know one's a Criterion, The Secret
Is
Sunshine.
it poetry or?
No, I heard Poetry's really great, but it's Secret Sunshine, which is a Criterion release, which now I really want to get. But I feel like I have no issues with the directing of this movie. I think it elevates the story in certain ways.
I think the next time I watch this film, I'll probably turn off subtitles. It's a very atmospheric.
Turn off subtitles? What?
Yeah, turn off subtitles.
So you won't hear what the
just don't even know what they're saying.
What?
It's very heavy on. That's not stupid. That's what all the directors do.
What?
They're just people who.
Wait.
Hold on. Let me explain.
I read in a director's screenplay book.
If you want to pick up on more aspects of a film, let's say if it's a foreign film, like if it's a an American film, what Martin Scorsese does is he'll turn off the sound and he'll watch it. So you become aware of the editing and the directing and the body gestures. And I think this is a movie that would definitely benefit if you turned off subtitles. You didn't know what they were saying. You sort of get maybe a different vibe from Ben, or you'd be more aware of the score or the directing. And I think that's probably what I'm going to do the next time I watch it, because I think there's definitely other aspects of the film that I want to focus on. Instead of mulling over the words that they say and trying to interpret that, more go off their body gestures. Or
I can tell you from a second rewatch that turning off the sound, I think you just noticed one thing that a lot of the times. Well, sorry, turning off the subtitles. That body language plays a really important theme in this movie, especially tied into directly masculinity. Whenever Ben and Jung-soo are together, Ben's always he sits back and he's kind of relaxed, and Jung-soo's always hunched over, but there's often like they be coming into a room together and Jung-soo kind of hunches over. There's that kind of dynamic right there. I don't necessarily think you have to turn up subtitles for that. And I think you just have to watch the movie again now.
Well, I'd watch it. I'd watch it again with the subtitles, but like the next time I watch it, it'll be without subtitles.
Okay.
There's other elements I want to pay attention to.
I feel like Matt's like one bad sentence away from like making fun of you a lot. I can see it in his eyes.
Go for it, man. It's not going to change my opinion.
No, you do you.
What you guys think of are there any like little things, Matt? Are there any little things you picked up on a second rewatch? The body language was a big one.
I
would
just say we haven't really discussed it very much, but I brought up earlier. Hey Me.
Yeah.
I picked up more on, and just kind of how sad she is. Because you have the obvious scene where she's like, "Oh, I wanted to go away like the sunset." And
I want to vanish.
But then also like there's like this desire for her to be the center of attention too, where when she's at the party and she does the big heart little heart dance, and everything, and you can tell she wants all eyes to be on her, and she wants to be entertaining, and also the when she first sees Jung-soo and she's like, "Oh, you called me ugly when last time we saw each other, and now I'm beautiful." So she's really she really needs other people's validation, and I think that's kind of what leads to her suicidal tendencies, and maybe she commits suicide in the movie. And then also, in her last scene, she takes her shirt off, and it's sort of spiritual in a way, but also I took it as like sort of like a need for attention as well. I don't know what you guys think about it, because I've been like I said, I've been looking at reviews for it. I'm not trying to be like I'm not saying like it's a bad thing, but no one really talks about her character very much in those essays. So I'm wondering what you guys picked up on for her.
Should we move into like, because we can talk about the filmmaking more too. Should we move into like, because this feels like we're talking to like theorizing territory now, kind of like branching into.
I have a crazy theory that I saw.
I
want to bring up later.
I have like a very solid like idea of what I think this movie is. What? Go,
before
Mark.
You guys get into theories.
Yeah.
Before you guys get into theories, should I say what I think, and then I'll listen to you, because I haven't looked up anything.
Okay. First viewing.
No one has anything to say about Hey Me? Just me?
Okay. Well, you can't like Hey Me.
I'm sort of gonna get into that a little bit.
Yeah. Okay.
Okay,
and
Mark,
then I'll let you guys go.
Yeah. Mark,
okay.
Go. Talk about your stuff, Mr. No Subtitles.
So I think after he goes into the bathroom the second time at Ben's apartment, it's like, oh, he murdered her. He's a serial killer or something. There's all these bracelets. And then, the movie ends, and, it's sort of like, I guess you could say it's sort of confirmed, like, oh, he's a serial killer. But then you think about, like, earlier in the film, she's like, don't you just want to disappear? Look for the meaning of life. There's that scene where she's doing the dance at dusk, and she's like, the jazz music's playing, and then she just starts crying. If you really, think about it, it's like, oh, she's this really sad individual. And it's like, oh, did she? And then like, there's that scene where he talks to her employer, and she's like, Jung Soo talks to Hae-Mi's employer, and she's like, I haven't talked to her. All these girls like go into crazy debt and they just disappear. And then he talks to Hae-Mi's family, and she's like, and then Hae-Mi's family tells Jung Soo, like, don't tell her to come back until she's paid her credit cards off. And it's like, oh, that's okay. Maybe something else is going on. And for me, I thought the movie was going to end. He's going to find her body in the dried up well at his house. That's what I was expecting. And like, Ben's a serial killer. So like, that was like my interpretation, but now I have no idea. I'm stuck between these two ideas, like she's disappeared or, Ben killed her, which I don't think Ben killed her, because that'd be way too obvious, and it would take out all the underlying themes.
All right. So so there's a few things that directly tie to Murakami. One is the female protagonist. Murakami has this weird tendency to like over-sexualize his female protagonist. And this movie definitely toned it down a little bit, but there's still that elements of using her body as kind of like a sense of freedom, a sense of kind of like, that's how I interpreted the dance at dusk. It's just kind of like exposing yourself to the world in hopes that it accepts you back, which I want to talk about, because probably the most important line of the movie is Jung Soo's, why do you so easily take your clothes off in front of like men? Only whores do that. I think that's one of the most important lines in the entire movie, for the change into the second half. But Murakami has a very tendency for the inclusion of cats and wells. His book, Wind Up Bird Chronicles, about half of it takes place at the bottom of a well. Cats play a big part in this movie, Kafka on the Shore. It's kind of like, those are like the standard elements of it. But Hae-Mi as a character, Murakami's female protagonists often are that kind of mysterious, eccentric, searching for a purpose kind of protagonist, where they often are directly kind of intertwined with our male protagonist. And then most of the time, his female protagonists disappear in line with this. It's very much, and this is why I have to really respect the movie. Murakami is an nearly impossible author to adapt outside of his more kind of like Norwegian Wood's movie. But Norwegian Wood he wrote in response because someone critiqued that he couldn't write a normal book. So he wrote Norwegian Wood and as a kind of like a standard romantic story, and then it became a movie and it became wildly popular, and it might be his most popular book. There's a lot to go off of here. There's a lot of theories to go off of here too. We can cover a few. Like, Ben sold her into like sex trafficking, which is a very popular one. I don't think Ben murdered. What?
I never heard that one.
That one's a big one. That he sold her because he goes to Africa a lot, and he might have sold her into sex trafficking and stuff like that. That's how he comes up with all his money, and that's how he's kind of like in the elite class. Ultimately, it's not important though, and I think that's a really kind of big thing. Is Hamy's disappearance and is not ultimately what happens to her is not important to the story in a weird way. I don't know what you guys thought about that, because the movie's very much about like its main themes, and I think that we should like the emphasis on the Jung-soo Ben relationship. Yes, it's mentioned more than the Hae-mi kind of character, but that's because it's ultimately the most important aspect of the movie. Because Ben messes with Jung-soo throughout the entirety of this movie. And I think when he says that he burns greenhouses and he's referring to that he's scouting nearby, I don't think he's talking about Hae-mi. I think he's talking about Jung-soo. I do not think that Hae-mi is the target of that conversation. I don't know what you guys thought. Matt, like, again, you've seen this movie twice.
Yeah,
What do you
I would
think?
say that theorizing. I mean, I have one cool theory I want to talk about later that like a Korean film critic brought up, but you're right that ultimately doesn't matter because it's about how Chung-soo's masculinity and feeling inferior because of his economic circumstances are kind of impacting his perception on things. Like you said, how he talks down to Hae-mi, but over something like taking your shirt off, and then never like verbally confronts Ben about the potential of him being a serial killer.
Yeah.
Like he's clearly more angry at Ben, but he'll never confront him to basically like, hey man, be straight with me or something like that. So interesting stuff there. Yeah, it is cool to think like what could have possibly happened here, but ultimately there isn't enough evidence to really support anything, and that's done on purpose. And it is just supposed to circulate around. It's more about who Chung-soo is as a person, and how like I guess it relates to other young South Korean men in the real world. I don't know, Mark.
I feel like there's a few themes. In our recommendations video, I said this movie has better class disparity and wealth disparity themes than Parasite. And on a second rewatch, it might have been a little hyperbolic, but I do think they're on the kind of same even playing ground, considering Jung-soo's entire character is centered around that wealth and class disparity. But there's also like visual examples of that. A lot of the times it's like framing the cars next to each other and kind of stuff like that. And oftentimes like we go from Ben's apartment right to Jung-soo's apartment or house, and we kind of like see the juxtaposition between the two. I don't know what you guys thought, kind of comparing that and like those two major themes. There's like a lot of like, this is like a very heavy movie to talk about. There's a lot to talk about. What do you guys think in terms of like its main themes? Rather, Mark, did you have anything that you noticed? I mean, we've all seen Parasite. We all love Parasite.
Yeah.
So
in regards to wealth disparity,
wealth disparity, class disparity, masculinity, those are like the three main themes. There's jealousy, anger.
It's definitely
misogyny.
Yep, misogyny.
Yeah, it's definitely one of those films that there's a lot of aspects of South Korean culture that you can't fully appreciate since we're Americans.
We are.
Well, yeah, we're dumb Americans.
Howdy, y'all.
Bond burning.
I don't get it. They didn't burn any bonds.
Bernie Bonds.
That's probably Mark Wahlberg.
2.5 hours you're gonna spend watching the Sox.
Yeah. Comparing to Parasite, I don't know. Maybe Parasite's a little more on the nose, but this, they're definitely talking about the same things. And I don't know. I definitely think I like what you said, Tyler. Definitely on the same field.
Yeah.
That's the best way I could put it.
Matt, you took like a very relaxed posture there.
He's ready to give a TED talk.
Where do you go? Go for it, Matt. What do you think?
I think that there are elements of like class disparity, but I don't think it's looking at it in the way Parasite looks at it. I think Parasite looks at it in both like a structural sense and in a psychological sense. So I think that the class disparity problem in South Korea and this movie Burning just is more about the psychological parts of it, and it's just a smaller element of this one character's of the many reasons why this character feels inferior. That is Jung-soo. Yeah, that's just what I was thinking. It didn't really have anything to do with.
I can understand that. I mean, this movie is entirely psychological.
Yeah.
There's often like visual elements of that when when Jung-soo like berates Hae-mi for her choices to like expose herself and have like a sense of freedom. Like he's like bathed in red and the environment's bathed in red from Ben's like taillights on his car, and I mean that's like filmmaking 101 is use of colors. I mean, we talked a lot about that in Punch Drunk Love with Mark. Mark mentioned a lot of like the red
Mark
and blue.
liked all the reds and the blues.
All the reds and the blues.
He was like a
because I know what that is.
He was watching with a 3D movie glasses on.
It's like
Yeah,
it's
the ones
also
that
close.
had the red and the blue lens. That's why I saw so many of those colors.
And the subtitles are off.
Yeah. Oh, that was the important part. The subtitles.
Yeah. I need. Yeah.
Do you think, Mark, when Punch Drunk Love, when you had your 3D glasses on and the forklifts coming towards the scene, you like jumped out of the way?
You went,
You're like, no,
Yeah.
not the forklift.
Yeah. I just spilled water all over me.
Dude, I think, I mean, this is like the a nice delayed
so
laugh.
funny.
That took you like 4 seconds to process that.
Just pouring water on himself. That's just the fact that we're staying awake when he's watching The Master again. He's gonna have a bottle of water on the ready.
Yeah. I use my mechanic. Yeah. I have used my mechanical engineering skills to program a robot so that when my eyelids go past a certain point, I get splashed with water. and then I shoot electrical pulses into my hand, so I go like this, clapping.
and then it automatically sends out a review that gives it 5 stars.
And I got it down.
Yeah.
That's what your education's worth it.
Man, remember when Mark Stanley was saying we had too many inside jokes on our podcast and he was wrong?
Yeah.
What was I gonna say? Going back, because I'm the straight man of this podcast, it seems like. I forgot what I was gonna say. Crap. The working title for this project.
I was the Elton John straight man.
Hey.
I didn't make it.
Rocketman is a good movie.
Rocketman's a good movie.
No, it is a great movie. I'm talking about it later. On.
I was gonna say. The working title for the screenplay of this was Project Rage, which kind of sounds really dumb, but I mean it kind of shines light onto. Jung-soo is a very angry individual, despite never outwardly kind of saying it, and it ultimately kind of is that.
Yeah.
That kind of outward
like his dad.
Like his dad. Yeah. I actually didn't. I didn't even realize that.
Yeah.
I mean,
that's why I'm here, folks.
Yeah, but that one little comment at each podcast. But no, like his dad assaults a official of the government. I mean, that's kind of like it's a little on the nose, but it kind of is like within thematic range of what's going on in this movie. And Jung-soo's, I mean, ultimately his decision at the end, spoilers, to kill Ben, is based in his own kind of angry reality, and it's probably not the real reality. He convinced himself that Ben killed Hae-mi, and that Ben's somewhat responsible no matter what, and he took it out and he killed him. And I think there's evidence enough in this movie to support that Ben did not. I think Hae-mi most likely killed herself, and I think when I mentioned that Jung-soo's comments were probably some of the most important in the movie, it's because we don't get a lot of actual glimpse into everyone's thinking. There's no like inward kind of monologue or what's happening. We get body movements and clues for Jung-soo, but Ben and Hae-mi are mysteries, and that's the point. And the one few actual examples of we get this is when Jung-soo sees Ben in the cafe and their conversation after, where he goes, "Yeah, Hae-mi, like she said, you meant a lot to her, like, and I was actually really jealous of that. Like, you were very important to her." And I think that's a really kind of telling example, because that's a first time we get an actual kind of like inward dynamic and explained. Because one thing I should harken back to is I think they could have established Jung-soo as this kind of like antisocial, kind of like more angry at the world and doesn't have the ability to kind of progress forward, but he's kind of confident at times and charismatic, and you get a real sense of why Hae-mi and him would gravitate to each other. And I think I like that kind of example and stuff like that. That was one. We guessed 3. I don't know what you guys thought. Like, what about like the Jung-soo character in comparison to that? I mean, do you guys have any points with that? There's just a lot.
No, not really.
Not really.
I wasn't paying attention.
Matt's mom walked behind us.
Well, I was kind of paying attention.
You forgot you're paying
I mean,
attention.
the one scene I think that represents his anger is when he just lashes out on Amy very condescendingly, and that's just it's kind of like reflect on his own lack of feeling validation at the same time, because it's like, oh well, like clearly I'm not good enough for you to dust. You clearly have to do all these weird things in front of guys because I'm not good enough for you, or something like that. Either because I'm not masculine enough, or because I don't have the wealth that Ben has.
Yeah.
Yeah. That's the only part that I heard about what you're talking about.
Matt got completely distracted. No, I don't. I think there's. I don't know, Jiangsu. Okay, so I feel like we should theorize. I feel like.
I have a crazy theory I want to talk about.
Go for it.
So
go for it.
So the very kind of small part about the movie is about Chung-Soo's writing, and he says he can't write because the world is too mysterious for him. But then towards the end, when he sort of is coming to the conclusion that Ben is a serial killer, he starts to write, and then this is from a South Korean film critic. This is not from me, just to clarify.
Mm-hmm.
The scene where Ben is killed, it's the only scene where the camera follows a different character that's not Chung-Soo. And so the implication is that perhaps this is Chung-Soo writing the scene. Like, the scene doesn't actually happen. He's writing it as a story because, first of all, it only follows Ben. Second of all, this is what I kind of conclude on my own. This is when I was talking earlier about how he is very confrontational towards Hae-mi and not towards Ben. And then it's like why it's like when you think of the logic of it, it's any normal person would verbally confront someone before killing them.
Yeah.
So it would kind of make sense in a way where it's like in his mind, he's like, oh yeah, I'm gonna show Ben what I'm made of when I murder him. So I thought that was kind of interesting. I don't know. There's really no proof to it other than what I said. It's kind of like whatever. But I thought it was kind of cool to think that because this is like the only time he writes, and that as soon as you get the scene of him writing, this scene comes up. So I don't know. I thought it was kind of interesting.
All right, so again, I can't outwardly go like that's wrong because this movie could very well, I don't think it is, but on a surface level go, yeah, Ben's a serial killer, and that could be it. That could be the end of the discussion. I think a lot of times the reality, and I'm not talking in a sense of like a perspective, but the actual reality of the movie is questioned. There are a few times where scenes happen and then immediately cuts to Jung-Soo waking up, and then you immediately go, wait, was that real? The most evident one of that is when he follows a Ben and like through the back roads, and he comes out on the lake, and then the next shot after that is he wakes up and he's all sweaty and it's dark, and you go, my first thought was, wait, was that real? Like what? Wait, it's like
it seems so unlikely that Ben wouldn't know that he's there or wouldn't find him.
But ultimately, and this is why I gravitate, Ben I don't think is a serial killer, and I think there's a few evidences for that. I think he's someone, because we're viewing this movie as a commentary on the dynamics of the upper elite, the highest class in society and the lowest class. It's kind of like Ben. I mean, he even says his job is he plays. Ben that entire movie just feels like he's orchestrating and having fun and messing with Jung-Soo and Hae-mi, because it's for an entertainment. It's why anytime he brings out a date or he brings out someone, they give a show, and all of his friends are just kind of seen like, feels like a little bit of a mockery, like they're there for entertainment. And I think ultimately that plays in a lot to the second half of the movie, because I think it's so evident that there's no way that Ben doesn't know that. Should we pause because the phone's going?
Yeah.
All right, 1 second, guys. All right, we're back. Matt has destroyed his phones. I forget what I was talking about. I think I was talking about Ben being treating Jung-Soo and Hae-mi as entertainment, and I think ultimately there's this weird line in the movie where Ben asks if Hae-mi knows what a metaphor is, and then he asks if Jung-Soo knows what it is, and we never get an answer. And Jung-Soo, I don't think, knows what a metaphor is, because Ben gives
he doesn't really say anything.
He doesn't say anything, and then Ben gives the idea of greenhouses, and then he reacts by literally checking greenhouses every morning. He's like, you didn't burn any. He's like, no, I did. I think ultimately when Ben says, I burned greenhouses, he's kind of like igniting. I don't
get it.
That thing within.
I don't either.
with Jung
Explain
Soo.
it.
I think
Explain
Jung
it.
Soo. I'm not gonna explain it because I don't know what a metaphor is. I think Jung Soo ultimately burns a greenhouse, but that greenhouse is Hae Mi. I think Jung Soo is a main cause of Hae Mi's death potentially in the movie, and I think Ben ultimately, yeah, morally, he probably just messes with the lower class because he can, and it's fun, and there's no repercussions or consequences to his action. And you mentioned at the end that we finally get Ben's perspective. We get his view. We get his follow him for 3 minutes, and ultimately, I think the realization is he's just kind of a dude, and there's nothing like mysterious about him. He's shown to like take care of himself and to have a close relationship with the girl he's dating at the time, who we presume is an upper class person as well. And I think ultimately that's done to show that there are two realities in this movie: the one that Jung Soo believes, and then the actual reality that Ben probably is just a guy who messes with the lower class because he can, and it's entertainment for him. And I think I think that's also evident when Jung Soo tells him that he loves Hae Mi, and he just laughs because
Yeah.
this is just a game to it. I don't think Ben's a serial killer because ultimately, why would he go to Jung Soo at the end? I think I think Hae Mi disappeared and he doesn't know, and then he's like, "Oh, cool, you found Hae Mi. I want to see what happened," and then he gets killed.
No, definitely on rewatch. Because when I first thought like you, I was like, oh, he's definitely the killer.
Yeah, he definitely
And
did
then
it.
second time, I was like, no, he's probably just a guy, just
Yeah.
very, he just lived a very easy life,
Yeah,
and doesn't. There's like that whole talk about that Hammy gives at the beginning about the little heart and the big heart, and the big
Yep.
heart looks for meaning in the little heart, just like it's kind of fine with like the small things in life, just like
Yeah.
going at it day by day, and yeah, Ben is like just the perfect representation of the little heart or the small
Yeah.
heart or whatever.
Ultimately, I feel like it doesn't ultimately Hae Mi's disappearance doesn't have
Yeah.
an impact because it's the story of Ben and Jung Soo, and it's a
So in
story
conclusion, this conversation is pointless because it doesn't matter.
It doesn't matter. None of this matters. Do
You've
you
listened
get
to this for so long for no reason at all.
Matt?
I have a question. What do you make of that sort of that box in the bathroom with all the bracelets?
I think it's well, that's the thing. I think it goes into no consequences. It's very out in the open. It's not a hidden box, and I
Yeah.
think that's because it's simply like a trophy of who he's messed with. I think and you could look at it, and it's very much kind of like a red herring. Like you see it, and you're like, oh, he's killed all these people. But I really think it's just something he's just like, hey, these are the people who I've just kind of like messed with a little bit. And
Yeah.
look, it's out in the open. What consequences am I going
Or
to
it could be
face?
something simple as a bunch of people just left their bracelets at his house and he's just keeping it like in a lost and found.
Yeah.
area.
He's like, they'll come back and they'll return it.
Yeah.
I'll return
Yeah.
it. No, I think ultimately the fact that it's because it's in a cupboard and it's right there. And I think ultimately that has to do with the fact that Ben thinks he faces no consequences for his actions. And I think that ties directly to kind of how he probably didn't do anything in the movie. But who knows? I could watch this movie a third time, which I'm going to, and then go, yeah, he killed her. Like, because he also does have sociopathic tendencies. I mean, he describes he's never cried. No feelings whatsoever. But you also have to look at it, and I think this is a really interesting thing that I read. We got to look at the movie from Ben's perspective too. He basically meets a friend when he's abroad, hangs out with his friend for 2 months, meets another mutual friend, and then he starts to get stalked by that mutual friend when his friend disappears. And from his perspective, he's just kind of living his life. He never contacts Jung Soo except for once. And I think, and that's like, Hae Mi disappears, and that's it. Like, his game is done. He's moving on. And then once Jung Soo comes back and it's like, what'd you do with her? Kind of like one of those things. He's like, I can still mess with this guy. And that's when he contacts Jung Soo again and stuff like that. He even has a thing where he calls him and he like knocks on the door. He invites him into his apartment to hang out with his friends. Yeah. It's a very like interesting dynamic, and I think Steven Yeun plays this so wonderfully, and I love everything about this movie. And this is basically just a podcast, just me ranting how much I love it while you guys sit there and go, "Okay, is he done?"
One more thing that I'm not sure about is the phone calls that Jung Soo was getting throughout the film, where he picked it up and there was nobody there. What do you make of that?
Matt,
it could just be Ben messing with him.
Yeah.
That simple?
I think it's that you get the phone calls of no one there, and then you get the phone calls from Hey Me where it sounds like someone's running and there's like a car honking and like someone's yelling. I think that was probably her suicide. If we're being like realistic, we probably just heard her kill herself in some capacity.
Or like it could just be something as mundane as like a butt dial from someone.
Yeah.
And then like you said, like when your brain decides something and then suddenly everything else around you starts to fulfill that one that logic that you have. So it could be something as mundane as just a butt dial or a prank call or something. But in Jungson's head, it's Hey Me loves me and she's in trouble. So now all of a sudden everything starts to fulfill that prophecy that he's already made for himself.
Well, we have to look at like why did Haimi have sex with Jung Soo, and it's ultimately to kind of prove her self-worth. It's like, hey, this guy called me ugly, and clearly, because she said she got plastic surgery, and clearly has had some impact on me. As
probably
we
made
know,
her having a cat to get him to come over.
Well, that's also another evident because Murakami loves his cats, and it's like a whole thing is like.
In more ways than one.
In more ways. That is a joke. We please do not sue us, Murakami. We're not slandering you.
Yeah, I know. Slandering you.
But basically, the fact that he never sees the cat until the end, and the cat just happens to come to the name it's kind of circumstantial, but he in his mind believes it. So. I don't know. This movie is like, again, I could read a theory and then watch the movie for a third time with that theory in mind and go, yeah, that makes sense. Look at all these clues. It's
like when Tyler watches Sam Raimi's Spider-Man 2 and it's a giant pile of garbage, but in his mind, his childhood youth is disguising the fact that this giant pile of garbage is actually this brilliant movie about a guy with tentacle arms building a sun beneath New York City. So it's perception is a very dangerous thing, and we're all victims of it.
I can't escape like one podcast without being insulted, can I? I can't do it. I saw Spider-Man 2 when I was like 13, 14, so clearly it's not youthful innocence.
Yeah, okay. When you're 13, 14, you like Man of Steel too. So
that's a good point. Things do change. Do you guys have any final thought? Oh, Hallmark scenes, low points. Completely forgot about that.
Mark Sleepy Time moments.
Wait, real quick. Hallmark scenes. Favorite scenes in the movie.
Miles Davis, her dancing in the sunset.
I agree with Matt. Yes, the dance at dusk.
Can I have like every scene? Is that an option? I love this movie.
If you want to water down.
No, I refuse.
Water it down.
One scene.
I feel like there's a few other things I want to briefly touch on. My favorite scene's the dancing in the dusk. That scene also took a month to film because this movie also feels like they had no natural lighting. And I kind of really love that. I'm sorry, no natural lighting. Doesn't make any sense. No artificial lighting. Because that scene they said took a month to shoot because they only had a few minutes at dusk to really be able to capture it. And I kind of love in that scene how they're like, it's kind of like hard to see a little bit what's going on. They're starting to like fade into darkness a little bit because the sun's setting. I really love that. What else is there? Yeah, there's like no artificial lighting. Everything feels very natural. And I think a big director who's a purveyor of that technique is like Michael Mann, who basically all of his movies are shot at like night basically, but he has no like artificial light. He just uses a specific type of camera to be able to capture lighting. So like in Miami Vice, when they're shooting scenes on top of a building in the dark, it looks like it's all clear because it's a camera that captures that really well. Mark, you're going to say something before I...
There's also one sequence that I really liked was when Jung Soo is looking for the greenhouse when he's running through those foggy fields. I really like those sequences. That was great.
There's I got a few more. The ultimate red herring of the movie, I feel like, when you're told the story of how Jung Soo's father burned all his mother's clothes, and we get that cut of the fire burning in the greenhouse, and he's a young kid, and there's no sound whatsoever, and the orange of the fire is like illuminating everything, and it's all dark around. I think that's wonderful. Ben's death is shot really well. It's just like blue snow. Or death. Yeah, he died. He got.
Or was it a metaphor?
Was it a metaphor? Yeah. Or was it?
No, he was writing the story.
I know.
Your theory's trash.
Your theory is awful. Yeah. There
it's
are.
Not my theory. It's a stuff theory.
There are no objective.
Oh, I thought you just claimed ownership of it.
I already said right before I said the. Right before
no, just now though.
Yeah, but it was my theory that I'm presenting for this episode. I clarified.
So you do claim ownership.
Before I even went into the theory, I said this is not mine.
Well,
This is belongs to Mr. Film Reviewer from South Korea.
Well, there are no objective answers to this, but there is objectively wrong
The only
answers.
objective answer is that The Last Jedi is bad.
So basically,
and Prometheus is a great movie.
Yeah.
Mark's sleepy time moments. Times Mark, like we made jokes before, falls asleep when he watches a movie and then wakes up 5 stars and then claps and then and then he writes it down in his little notebook. And then makes fun of Matt and I for reviewing our stuff on Letterboxd.
Yeah, well, for the public to look at.
Yeah, for the public to look at. And for us to gain more viewers.
Because when Mark has to write why he likes the movie, and he goes, "Oh wait, I fell asleep through the whole thing. I don't have anything I actually liked about it," and then that's where the problem comes in.
Yep. Mark's sleepy time moments. It's basically
Mark's like, I'm gonna get my revenge.
One day.
They laugh now.
Least favorite scenes in the movie. Anything that stood out.
What?
So yeah, least favorite scenes. Matt's mom talked to him again. So, Mark, have any least favorite scenes in the movie?
I'd say the first 30 minutes I wasn't particularly engaged in. But as the movie went along, I started liking it more and more. But those first 30 minutes, there wasn't a specific scene. It was just Jung-soo, I just was like, oh, this guy is. Do I have to watch it for the next 2 hours?
So do you have any least favorite elements? Is it the pacing? Is it the character? Is it directing?
I'd say probably. I don't know. This movie is. I mean, it's a mystery movie, but the movie in itself is a mystery.
Yeah.
So I don't know. It's really hard for me to say definitively what aspect I didn't like, but man, I was just not a big fan of Jung-soo. So. I don't know how to pronounce it correctly, but anyway, the that opinion will probably be subject to change on subsequent viewings.
Matt, least favorite elements. You gave this 3.5.
I'd say there's just too many scenes of him tailing Ben, in the second half. No scene specifically. I just think that stuff could have been cut a little, could have been trimmed down a bit.
Mm-hmm. I think if anything. If I were to,
I was just a simp for this movie.
I am a simp.
Shut your mouth.
If I were to try to create any critiques, I would say it's probably.
You're biased against South Korean movies. You're a South Korean movie shill.
This is my favorite South Korean movie. I haven't seen another one that I have enjoyed as much as this one.
Yeah, that says a lot about your character.
Oh my god! Wow, you're getting really angry. I would say I don't really have any.
This movie too, and this is funny.
I don't have any directly favorite or least favorite scenes. I would say, if anything, I'd kind of agree with you, Matt. There probably is 1 or 2 extra tailing scenes, but I ultimately think they all serve a purpose. But yeah, maybe 10 minutes of this movie could have been cut out because it is 2.5 hours long. In the short stories it's based off of are 20 pages. And you're
it's 13.
Yeah, you're
30 minutes.
Yeah, you're stretching a very narrow story very thin, but I think this movie's so masterfully created that I really don't. I kind of really love this movie. Do you guys have any final thoughts? Any final comments before we go to grades?
No.
No?
No.
All right, grades. We grade stuff on an A, B, C, D, F scale. Matt, what do you give?
F.
What do you give Burning?
B.
You give it a B?
Yeah.
Awesome. Mark, what do you give Burning?
I also give it a B.
I give it a B. I am going to give this movie the highest
No one
possible
cares.
A.
All right, let's move on.
I give this movie an A. It's one of my favorite movies. It's one of my favorite movies of the decade. I can't wait to watch this again. When this ultimately leaves Netflix, I'm going to buy it on Blu-ray. I cannot wait to watch this again. All right. This is our What We've Been Watching section. We haven't done this in a while, so we got some movies except for Mark, who hasn't done anything. Matt.
I've done things. What are you talking about?
Mark's been reading self-help books.
I have not. I do not. That's a scam.
Mark, because you have less stuff, what have you been watching?
The first movie I rewatched Fantastic Mr. Fox. I don't really need to talk about it. It's the third time I've seen it this year. I need a 3-year hiatus from this film. I love it, but I've seen it too many times in a short period of time. What else I watched was First Reformed, directed by Paul Schrader, starring Ethan Hawke and Amanda Seyfried.
We saw
it, Matt?
Tyler.
Yeah, we saw it in theaters.
Oh, this movie could have been a damn near masterpiece for me, except for 2 things. Or no, one thing. The green screen. Yes, the scene where Ethan Hawke and Amanda
Seafood.
Seyfried. They're like floating through the stars and then trash, and then it's like, I like how
What are
on
they
the
trying
nose.
to say?
I like how like, you know, it's sharp, I guess you could say this film is. It's just, you know, not holding anything back. It's far from subtle. I like that about the film, but that scene was just like, oh, come on. If you took that out, like, or if it was like no green screen,
Yeah.
it could have been such a good film.
Paul Schrader wrote Taxi Driver.
And Raging Bull.
Yeah, he clearly understands subtlety, but I think in his later years he must have like purged.
It's like, what's a green screen? What? This is magical.
Put him in front of trash.
Yeah. But I would say up until that point in the movie, I was so into it. I was like, this is fantastic. I cannot believe I've been holding out on this. And then I saw that scene, like the second it like transitioned to like green screen, I was like, oh no, please don't.
Remember there was like when we saw the movie, Tyler, there's like an old couple was there as well.
Yeah.
And I'm wondering like what they thought of the movie when they were leaving.
They're like, these movies don't make any sense anymore.
Yeah. And then
God's not dead.
Yeah. I don't want to like, you know, get too much into I'm not going to get into spoilers, but I'm just going to say that I had to think about the ending for quite a bit. And obviously it should be in no way be taken literally for what happened.
I mean,
at least that's my consensus.
We all have our thoughts on it. I don't like this movie a ton. I think it's good. But I think directors who, like Spike Lee is a wonderful director at understanding that he doesn't have any subtlety. All you have to do is look at his Do the Right Thing. And that movie has zero subtlety, but it captures everything so well and so kind of.
You're saying that the scene in The Five Bloods where the French guy puts on that "Make America Great Again" hat isn't subtle?
No, yes, I'm saying it's all subtle, but I feel like Paul Schrader doesn't understand how to use a lack of subtlety to put forward a message that isn't like beating you over the head. That's like the closest I can ever come to calling a movie like very pretentious.
It's pretty subtle before the green screen. Like it's not like drowning you in the message. And also like I think Calvary is like the quintessential religious movie of this decade.
Well, I would like to talk about a film that this First Reformed draws a lot from. Is Ingmar Bergman's Winter Light. I know you guys haven't seen it, but that's a film about a priest who deals with who's having sort of like Ethan Hawke's character isn't exactly having a crisis of faith. He's just having a crisis about like the direction with, I guess, the church is going. But Winter Light is about a priest who's in this small church in Sweden that no one really goes to. There's like, 10 people who show up to every mass, and he's having a crisis of faith. And there's a young man who attends his services who's like very suicidal. I won't go too much into details, but and then the priest in Ingmar Bergman's film has a relationship with a woman that he like completely shuts off, even though she's like trying to help him. And like Paul Schrader took both of those things without like, any sort of subtlety about pulling it from that source and putting it in this film. And, for the first hour, I was like, this is like a modern day Ingmar Bergman film. So I thought that was really interesting. I know that on the A24 podcast, Paul Schrader and Sofia Coppola talk about this film. So I'm hopefully Paul Schrader talks about Winter Light in that podcast. I'd also like to. There's one specific shot in the film that was right from Taxi Driver. Do you remember that shot in Taxi Driver where Travis Bickle is in the restaurant and he's sitting down with those guys, but he's like sort of far off, and he's like, he has like a cup of Sprite or like some sort of clear carbonated drink, and the camera just goes right into the cup, and you just see the bubbles coming up.
Yep. Is that
that shot?
First Reformed?
Yeah, it's when he pours the Pepto-Bismol.
Yeah.
Oh, that's right. Oh.
And it goes right into the cup. So
Paul Schrader, I think we just confirmed that he has no original ideas.
Well, what's also funny is that he said, Paul Schrader said First Reformed is the best film of the decade.
No, wait, he's wrong. Nicholas Winding said that Only God Forgives is the best film of the decade.
They should have a fist fight to the death to see who's right.
Yeah.
First Reformed. I don't know. It's one of those movies that I saw once I don't ever need to see again, I feel like.
Oh, I feel like after I finished it, I was like I was like tempted to just rewind it all the way to the beginning.
Without
So yeah, I
subtitles?
watched First Reformed without subtitles. Yes, no, I needed Swedish subtitles. So I didn't
What else did you
watch any other movies. I didn't watch any other movies, but I've been reading a lot. I'm reading Leonardo da Vinci, written by Walter Isaacson.
Oh, yo.
Walter Isaacson is I'm really excited to read his other biographies. He's done Steve Jobs, Einstein, and Benjamin Franklin and Henry Kissinger. And he what he's doing with his biographies is he's trying to trace what makes a genius, given the subjects that he chooses. And Leonardo da Vinci is like a household name, infamous for his paintings, drawings. And so I picked this book up because I was just curious. I didn't really know much about Da Vinci except for like The Last Supper and the Mona Lisa. And this is a fantastic biography. Walter Isaacson paints a clear picture of what Florence was like in the 1400s, under the
You don't
Borgias.
need that, Tyler.
What?
You don't need that.
I don't need that at all. Yeah.
I don't know what we're talking about.
Yeah, I don't know either. So yeah, it's fantastic. And you make him, Leonardo is like a larger than life figure. It's like, oh, Leonardo da Vinci, he's like the reference point for any genius. Like I think like in Iron Man, they say like, oh, you're like a modern day Leonardo da Vinci. And then like Tony Stark says, oh, that's ridiculous. I don't paint or something. So this book makes Leonardo feel like a real person, and it's fantastic.
Do you think
and,
if we showed?
Is there like a mix of fiction in there? Like other?
No, this is pure,
Okay.
Pure biography, no historical fiction.
Do you think if we showed Da Vinci Iron Man, he'd have a stroke?
You probably would.
Like, what is this? This is
Wait,
not the art.
And
It's so brilliant. They learned how to work as a team.
yeah.
No, they fell apart in Civil War.
Yeah.
Oh no! What will happen?
Oh no, not to the aliens.
Not the purple guy.
So I took one art history class in college, but I didn't really pay attention. But this book goes into depth about what makes Leonardo's work so special. And I think it'd be of interest to you guys as well, because he was obsessed with optics and framing. And I never really understood how genius The Last Supper is, or, the Vitruvian Man, which is like that guy who's like in those two positions.
But I'm still hungry. We're not going to have any more dinner?
What?
The Last Supper.
I missed that.
Oh.
He had no confidence when you were saying it. You went.
Yeah.
That's what Tyler did.
Yeah, goes into great detail about what makes Leonardo so special. And also I just read a chapter on like his rivalry with Michelangelo and how they hated each other.
Who painted the Sistine Chapel? Is that
The Creation of Adam, Raphael and Michelangelo. Michelangelo
did God touching man.
Creation of Adam.
Yeah, that's what I was wondering. Who did Statue of David?
Michelangelo.
Was Michelangelo?
He was a sculptor.
Yeah.
The sculptor. Okay, thank you.
Well, the reason why Leonardo hated him is because like Michelangelo was getting all these commissions as a painter, but he's like, this is ridiculous. He is a sculptor.
I think Raphael did Little David, and then Michelangelo did Big David.
Okay. Who did the fake David in Florence? Is that just kind of like a modern thing?
It might have been Leonardo's teacher, because his teacher did a statue of David, but he's like a younger boy. The Michelangelo David is like he's a young man.
Okay.
And that's why it was like so revolutionary, is because like that was the first time anyone had seen David sculpted like that. But yeah. Very fascinating. Oh, and Matt, do you know Caesar Borgia?
The Borgia? Caesar Borgia?
The
son of the Pope of Rome.
Pope Alexander the Sixth?
Yes.
Yeah. At one point in history, Caesar Borgia, Leonardo da Vinci, and Caesar Borgia, Leonardo da Vinci, and Niccolo Machiavelli were holed up in this town, living together for about 3 weeks. Is that crazy to think? Three big historical figures.
These three legendary figures are all trapped in the same room. And they probably weren't even talking about it. They're probably just getting drunk Like they probably won't even talk about anything
Like
intellectual. Yeah.
Leonardo was one of Cesar Borgia's military engineers. He was hired, and then Niccolo Machiavelli was like his like was I think Cesar Borgia was the subject of The Prince, the ruthless handbook for dictatorship. I think. But he was like advising him. Anyways, I'm going too long about this book. I would very much recommend it.
That at some point.
Sounds really interesting, actually. Surprisingly.
I also read Animal Farm in 1984. I'll probably talk about more in the August recommendations video, but those were fantastic.
Tyler, we're not going to invite Mark to the August recommendations.
I know.
It's funny how you guys are English majors, and I'm here talking about books, and you guys don't.
Hey, I got books to talk about when we do our recommendation.
Yeah, so do I.
Okay.
Yeah,
Okay.
I actually have.
It's called Film Frauds, not Book Boys.
Matt, what kind of stuff did you watch?
I watch a lot of movies.
So did I.
I first watched Midnight in Paris, which is like my comfort movie. I had a big M&M cookie, and I ate it, and I was like, while I was watching the movie, I'm like, oh man, this movie is just phenomenal. This is my favorite Woody Allen movie. He really, for all the terrible things that he really does appreciate artists, especially during the Roaring '20s, and it's so like heartwarming to because you're kind of you put yourself in Gil's shoes, and you're just like listening to Hemingway, Zelda Fitzgerald, F. Scott Fitzgerald, Gertrude Stein, all talking, and it's so witty, and each character has its own distinct personality. And Hemingway is great. The guy who plays Hemingway is great. Tom Hiddleston's great as F. Scott Fitzgerald.
I was about to ask who plays him. I knew it was someone famous, but I couldn't remember.
Yeah, and it's so awesome to be in this conversation, especially if you like these artists before watching the movie. And I've been to Paris, and I don't think it's really quite as beautiful as the movie makes it out to be. But
It is definitely not.
You could tell that the filmmakers love Paris, and you get that kind of nostalgic feel for it. And I just love the message about how people are nostalgic for an earlier time, and then when you think about it, oh wait, that time's not really as good as this time from a practical standpoint. But some people get stuck in the past. And I gave it 5 stars to Letterboxd. I think this movie is just so great. As someone who loves all these literary people, it's just a nice movie you can watch. You get a nice message out of it, and it's beautifully shot, and you just immerse yourself into this world that Woody Allen has created, and it's really, really great. I don't know. Have you guys seen Midnight in Paris?
I've seen it twice.
I haven't.
Is it in your top of the decade? Is it like one of your best movies?
It might be. I'll have to review it. I'll have to go through it again. But yeah.
Yeah, we saw this on a bus, like traveling to Switzerland.
Well, we're driving to Paris.
We were driving to Paris?
Well, because it's called Midnight in Paris.
Well, that's a good point. I can't remember. It was on one of our long bus rides, but I saw it once, and I was like, that movie's really great. But I watched it on a little screen, and then I got home, and then like 3 years later, I watched it again. I'm like, that movie's also really great again.
Yeah.
Adrian Brody's Salvador Dali in that. I forgot. And
there's like so many funny scenes. Like Rachel McAdams' family is like really conservative.
Yeah.
And Gil is like Ellen Wilson's like this liberal writer, and they kind of clash there. There's just so many like funny little this movie is literally just interactions between characters, and like it's all so like brilliant. It's like
you could say that every movie is interactions between characters.
What?
You could say that every movie is interactions.
I mean, you could say that. I mean, what I mean is conversations. It's just conversations between characters. And I was excluding plot.
Okay.
Most movies have a plot in inclusion with the interactions.
I'm waiting for the Man of Steel dig.
Plot.
I'm waiting for the Man of Steel dig.
What?
I'm waiting for the Man of Steel insult.
There's no Man of Steel dig. I don't need to belittle myself by mentioning a great movie with a pathetic movie that no one cares about. I also watched. I don't want to stress on this too much. I'll probably talk about it more during our August roundup. I watched Rocket Man. It was great. It's probably I didn't see Bohemian Rhapsody, but I watched him like this is probably what people want Bohemian Rhapsody to be like.
Yep.
What's his name? Taron Egerton is phenomenal. The music was great. Of course, I already knew the music, but I think that they, transitioning into musical, I think it really worked. Especially Goodbye Yellow Brick Road part is so amazing. You guys have seen it. It's when he decides to go to rehab.
Yeah.
And he's like, oh man, it's such like a nice scene.
Yeah, it basically does, because Bohemian Rhapsody, and I've been wanting to talk about this for a while, basically just goes, you remember this song or remember this moment? Bohemian Rocket Man contextualizes the songs and like adds them to further the story, and you're just like, wow,
it's like educational and like you said, it hurts the story. Like with the Rocket Man musical part where he just ODs and then and then you get from the visual storytelling of him being put on a stretcher, him being propped up, and then he walks to the next room and he's already going out into the stage. Because you have a brain that he's clearly rushing his own recovery, and he's being rushed up by his producers and his agents. And yeah, it's just great to see the music, enhance the story to the movie.
Yeah. What about the fact that the final song of the movie is "I'm Still Standing" after he comes out of rehab, and you're just like, wow, you're like, I love "I'm Still Standing" even more now than I already did.
Yeah,
Like,
it enhances them because it enhances the songs. You know the context of them too, and it's great. And also like the musical numbers and all that choreography and stuff is really
Ken Richardson's phenomenal. I listen to that soundtrack on my own too, basically as much as I do some of the actual Elton John songs. So it's really good.
I started listening to the soundtrack more because I think it's good. I watched Alien Covenant, which you talked about. It's crap. I watched The Breadwinner, which is an animated movie. It's an Afghanistan. It's like takes place in Afghanistan, but it's from an Irish animation company, and it's about like an 11-year-old girl living in Taliban occupied. What?
Mark's face is just like a disgusted face or something.
What?
That.
Oh no, I was looking at my fidget spinner.
Oh my god.
It's like a girl living in Taliban occupied Afghanistan, and it's pretty good. It's a little slow, but the animation's good, and you learn more about how women are were like horribly oppressed during this time. Like the first scene is her talking to her father kind of playfully, and then some guys go and yell at her for speaking too loudly, and it's just really disgusting. But it's good. It's like I said, it's a little slow though, but you might enjoy it. And then finally, I watched 2 Jeremy Saulnier movies. First one being Green Room, and by God, this movie is absolutely phenomenal. I've seen this movie like 4 times. I just adore this movie. I just adore it so much. Anton Yelchin is insane. He's so good. It's so sad that we can't get any more movies with him. And what's his name is really good in it as well.
Patrick Stewart
is really good, and it's just Jeremy Saulnier is great at making realistic conflicts. Like it's literally just some kid takes the wrong turn to the wrong room, and then all of a sudden him and his band are caught in this horrible nightmare situation with a bunch of skinheads. And when you watch the movie 4 times, you start to appreciate more things about it. And just like when they're like walking through the bar and when they're trying to escape, and like it's all like dark and like there's some green lighting. There's so much like interesting artistic designs and choices they made in the movie that I really appreciate. And I just love like the ideas of like living in the moment. Like there's that great scene earlier on when they're playing for the band, everything goes into slow motion, and it's like the whole crowd is just into the song. Which I mean, like if you go to like a concert or a club, and then that happens in real life, and you think like, oh, if I went to a club and I went to the bathroom, hypothetically, I went to the wrong door and I walked in someone getting murdered, like this could have, like this is kind of a believable thing that could happen. It's extremely unlikable, but it feels somewhat palpable in what happens. And yeah, I love this movie so much. I love how it follows just like this like indie punk rock band that won't even put their music online because they don't think it's real enough. It's not like rock and roll enough.
Yeah.
So there's a lot of good stuff. And then I finally watched Hold the Dark
again,
which is Jeremy Saulnier's most recent film. I rewatched it, and I wanted to like it more on the second time, but unfortunately, it's not really that good. I love Jeremy Saulnier's Green Room. I love Blue Ruin, and I really like Halloween Murder Party. And the difference between those 3 movies and this movie is that Jeremy Saulnier wrote the script for those 3 movies, whereas his friend, who's in all of his movies, wrote the script for Hold the Dark, and I think that it suffers from there. It just doesn't feel as realistic. It feels kind of wandering. Everything with Alexander Skarsgård character feels kind of weird and unrelatable, and I didn't really like it more on second viewing. And I don't know. Have you guys seen Green Room and Hold the Dark?
I haven't seen Green Room. We've watched.
You haven't seen Green Room?
I haven't seen Green Room.
I've seen Green Room.
It's a really bad blind spot considering I really love Blue Ruin.
I almost spoiled the crap out of it. Wow.
I already know what happens in it. Like it's been spoiled to me for years. You go on Reddit and people openly talk about the movie.
Because it's
like,
good.
Yeah, I know. Like, it's a definite blind spot. Mark, you've seen it though, right?
Yeah, I watched it. I think in May this year. It's a very intense movie.
Yeah.
I really enjoyed it. I'd probably have to rewatch it again because clearly it affected you more than it did me.
Yeah, it's one of my favorite movies, I think, of the decade. It's just
wow.
It's great to see action movies where the characters, where it's like it's a battle who can be slightly less incompetent than the other side.
Yeah, that's right.
It's just both sides effing up endlessly, and then one side happens to just miraculously get something right.
Yeah.
And I love movies and books and TV shows where characters can just get picked off like randomly.
Yeah.
I remember in the Five Bloods we talked about that as well. I just like the gritty realisticness of it. And plus, like, I don't know, Green Room. You guys should watch it again, or for Tyler, watch it for the first time.
Yeah. I'm getting better with your recommendations, so I know I have to watch it. Any other movies?
No, that's it.
That's it. All right, you guys ready for this? I got a bunch.
How many?
Let me count. I was looking at your Midnight in Paris review, Matt. Hold on. I watched 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8 movies.
Oh my God.
So my first one I watched was Die Hard with a Vengeance. I watched this on my birthday because I love Die Hard, and I remember liking Die Hard 3 as much as it. And I can say I watched those original Die Hard movies when I was like 13, 14. And Die Hard with a Vengeance is decent. It has probably the best 45, 50 minutes out of anything in that franchise. The first 45 to 50 minutes of Die Hard with a Vengeance, where it's nonstop pace, they're solving clues, and it's basically like, it's legitimately like edge of your seat action, is phenomenal. It's legitimately like beautifully done. And then the next like hour and 15 minutes is kind of just generic action movie with a less interesting Die Hard villain, and it separates the Bruce Willis and Samuel Jackson too much, despite the fact that they're the best parts of the movie. But my God, those first 45, 50 minutes are honestly worth rewatching. Like, if I ever rewatch this movie, I might just watch the first 45, 50 minutes and then stop. It also has a stupidly extra 10 minutes where the movie ends, and then they went, I feel like it was like a test audience reaction where the movie ended and they went, it wasn't satisfying enough. And then they had to add another 10 minutes. Completely takes the wind out of the movie a little bit. But there's an extra, like, special ending, which is really great. If it's on YouTube, I would recommend watching it, but I won't spoil it. I then watched Black Hat. I fucking love Black Hat. I love Black Hat so much. It's like, it's a box office failure. People don't like it, but this movie's kind of really great. I'm going to recommend it eventually. My next director is going to be Michael Mann, and we're going to do Black Hat. I don't want to spoil too much of it, but it's one of my favorite Michael Mann movies.
The Michael Mann?
Michael Mann is the Michael Mann. That was a bad joke. Chris Hemsworth is great in it. There's a lot of like commentary on it. And if you're a big fan of Michael Mann, this is like a wonderful trajectory in his career, and it's in line with it. It's basically like a 75-year-old man making one of the more kind of like modern movies out there. It's phenomenal, and I loved every second of it, to the point where I immediately bought it on Blu-ray after I was done watching it. I watched Adaptation. I think
Get into it.
The Room.
I think I have issues with Adaptation and being John Malkovich, to the point where I can recognize how creative they are, but they don't feel like movies to me. And I understand the story of how weird it is, that Adaptation, you're basically watching the movie of the person writing the movie you're watching, which doesn't make a lot of sense, but it's really creative. But it also, like, this movie, probably more than being John Malkovich, would be benefited from a rewatch. And it's definitely incredibly creative. And Nicolas Cage somehow, like, physically transforms himself to make himself a lot shorter. It's really wonderful. This is probably one of his best performances. But there's something, like, overly gimmicky about it to me that I can't get past. It's why I love Anomalisa a lot, and it's why I really like Eternal Sunshine of a Spotless Mind. Because while those have their own kind of gimmicks and ideas, they feel like a more coherent movie. Mark, what do you think about that? You're a big Adaptation fan.
So I think I texted this to you guys, but I'll reiterate it now. And this is like the kind of movie where like Tyler, you said you saw Frances Ha at the right time.
Yep.
That's basically what it was for me with this movie, because I was sort of like really getting into film, and I really wanted to understand the structure of film. And there's this very famous book out there called Story by Robert McKee. And it's like the principles of screenwriting and structure and all that jazz. And it's like it came out in 1997. It's like a 400-page book. And it's like, here's what you need in each scene. And you have to have subtext, and you have to have motivations. And it's like Act 1, Act 2, Act 3. At the end of Act 1, you have to have the specific event. And at the end of Act 2, it has to be like, this thing happens. These things are accomplished. And it has to be this amount of time. And it's like very rigid. And as someone who's like getting into film, I was like, this feels very constricting. I mean, is this really what the formula is?
Yep.
And this is before I'd really gotten into foreign films. So I was really conflicted. I was like, oh, this doesn't seem fun at all. You know, if I want to write a screenplay, there's just so many rules. And then one day I was on the Criterion channel and it said like leaving this month. And like, it was like adaptation, Spike Jonze. And I remember seeing that like it was on Roger Ebert's like, 4-star list. So I was like, okay, it's leaving soon. I'll watch it. And my jaw hit the floor when I saw Nicolas Cage holding that book in the film.
Yeah.
And Charlie Kaufman basically dissects the the book in that film and proves it wrong countless times. And he does it in such a brilliant way by putting himself as the main character, but giving himself an imaginary twin who follows the rules of the book.
Yep.
And it blew my socks off. And I think, you talked about like how that movie didn't exactly resonate with you. It felt a little quirky, I guess you could say.
Yeah, it's ultimately like I understand how creative it is, and it's basically like I find that movie enjoyable because of how creative it is.
Yeah.
But from like a genuine movie perspective in terms of like characters and narrative and kind of stuff like that.
Yeah.
I felt like I really was like watching kind of like a gimmick movie, but a really damn good one at that. It's probably one of those movies like we talked about with Burning, where I'm going to watch it again because it's coming out on Blu-ray. And I feel like it'd be one of those movies that'd be really cool to check out. And I'm going to watch it again. And I'm probably going to end up getting more out of it the second time around. And I can watch that. So
I'm not going to tell you to go like read the screenplay book that the movie's based upon, but it really enhances.
I don't have enough time.
I mean, I have it if you want to borrow it, but it enhances it. It takes it to like, the next level. I think I'd have to really think about it, but I think adaptation is like probably my favorite film of the 2000s. Like, I'd have to really think about it, but I'm like, it's either that or number 2. And it's like, reading the book takes it to a whole new level because it's such sharp critique, and it really shows how brilliant Charlie Kaufman is. It's unbelievable. I mean, the way he was able to completely take every single rule in that book and just, turn it on its side and say, get lost.
Yeah, I mean, I definitely respect Charlie Kaufman more after this movie. And that's why I'm really curious. I mean, I went out after I watched this movie and bought the book I'm Thinking of Ending Things, and read it. I'm very curious to see how he adapted to the movie because the book's very like adequate. I wasn't a big fan of the book.
Oh, you finished it already?
I finished. It's only 200 pages. It's not a
oh, okay.
Read. I read it in like 2 sittings. It's not hard. And it's not very. I'll talk about it. I'm going to talk about it in the recommendations video. But yeah, adaptation is really cool. I recommend you guys check it out. It's like $2 on Amazon. You can rent it. So there's that. This one's streaming on Netflix. I watched Public Enemies, Michael Mann's 2009 film. Probably it's not my favorite movie of his, but it still has a lot of really great elements. It's basically like 10 years before The Irishman, but a Michael Mann movie. It's basically like it's like Christian Bale it's like the creation of the FBI and like the last great hurrah of like the 1920s bank robbing criminals. And it's basically like a cat and mouse game between Christian Bale and Johnny Depp, who plays John Dillinger. And ultimately what Michael Mann does a lot is commentaries on systems and kind of the deconstruction of that as well. And it feels very much like a movie that the stuff you're seeing on screen, like the cat and mouse hunt, is very unimportant compared to the greater developments happening behind with the increased surveillance and like the modernization of money and how banks just don't have a lot of physical money in them at a time. It's a really interesting movie. I would say it's his ugliest looking movie. It's not really well visually directed. Michael Mann has a really great sense of creating like cities as extra characters. All I like to do is look at Miami Vice as an example for that. And this one is just like gray buildings, and it's kind of really ugly, and it's also like 10 minutes too long. What else did I watch? What?
Bye Bye Birdie.
Bye Bye Birdie. No, Bye Bye Blackbird.
Whatever. I saw the movie like 10 years ago.
Did you really?
Yeah.
Bye Bye Blackbird. I watched Inherent Vice. This is like my blind spot. Mike, what's it called? Paul Thomas Anderson movie. It's kind of really great, but it's also a movie that ends, and I go, didn't really get a lot of. Didn't really like. Didn't have to like. It was hard processing all that because that's how Paul Thomas Anderson made the movie, because our main characters basically hopped up on drugs for most of the movie. And he gets
it's based on a Thomas Pynchon novel.
Yeah,
he's just known for being this like really crazy eccentric writer.
Yep.
Or things don't really make any sense.
Yeah, and it captures that really well. I would say that there's like a few moments that are legitimately hilarious in this movie. Matt,
Did I get you?
did I get you? Yep, did I get you? And there's the point where, that they said,
Oh,
heroin.
the photograph scene. I died. Like I literally died during that scene.
They say heroin.
I haven't seen it. I haven't seen it.
It's not a spoiler, but it's just like they say heroin comes from breast milk. Here's a photo. Ah, here you go.
Yeah.
It's just like,
He's just actually normal.
Yeah. And it comes. It's such a great. I paused the movie because I was laughing so hard because I was missing.
I couldn't control myself.
I
was like, thanks.
Joaquin Phoenix is phenomenal. It's a little long, and like an hour into it, it starts to lose a little bit of it. But this is also a movie I want to watch again, and I feel like that's really important. The fact that I want to go back and watch it is kind of like a big tell for movies for me. What else did I watch? I watched Last of the Mohicans, Michael Mann's '92 movie. It's giant. It's his most accessible movie, but it still has the same commentaries about government and systems and kind of like government oppressing stuff. And it's like it's just Daniel Day-Lewis is a beautiful adopted Mohican Indian fighting the British. And it's kind of and also fighting another group of another Indian tribe. And it's pretty good. It's a really solid Michael Mann movie. I wouldn't say it's anything special. And I feel like the romance is a little hard to get behind. All right, we're almost done. I watched Moneyball.
Oh, nice.
The 2011 baseball movie with Brad Pitt. This movie's phenomenal. Baseball, we all grew up with baseball and loving baseball, and then we all kind of fell out of it because it's hard to watch a 3-hour game where not a lot happens. But this movie is probably the best baseball movie ever made. It's probably one of the best sports movies ever made because it is a movie that is aimed at a baseball audience while still making the information accessible to a public audience, but also does a wonderful job of having this really great analytical side while also contributing characters to it as well. Matt, you look disgusted.
What? I was looking at my face.
Oh, nice. I'd say Moneyball is really, really great, and that's that. Then I watched The Raid 2. This is like the Reddit circle jerk movie of the century, and it is for very good reason. And also, it honestly kind of makes The Raid Redemption, it's kind of like obsolete a little bit. I described in my Letterboxd review that The Raid Redemption's basically an action movie on steroids, and The Raid 2 is The Raid Redemption on steroids. This movie's just the best. It's just the best. Watching it, I've seen it like 4 times now.
At my house the first time.
Yeah. And then I watched it 2 more times, and then I watched it again because I wanted a feel-good movie, even though it's not feel-good. I mean, what else is there to say? This is just the best. I mean, this is just, everyone has seen The Raid 2. It's 2.5 hours long, and it flies by, and I loved it. And it has, like, the best action scene ever put into movie with the kitchen fight at the end.
Yeah. And they go slowly go like this.
Yep. I would say it actually, like, it's like such a step above The Raid Redemption because the director Gareth Evans, I think that's his name. Like he has like one of the best car chases in action movie scene, with, like the camera like flying through windows and stuff like that, and it's so great. It's so amazing. Matt, you weren't the biggest fan of Raid Redemption, and then you watched The Raid 2, and you're like, this movie's awesome.
I like The Raid Redemption.
You do?
Yeah.
But do you love The Raid 2?
I think The Raid 2 is really great, yeah.
Yeah. So that's that. That's all my movies, and then I watched Burning. I have, like, this month I've watched nothing but, like, long movies. I watched a lot of long movies. I watched Magnolia, I mean, all this kind of stuff. Inherent Vice is 2.5 hours. It's just a long month for me.
You've seen all Paul Thomas Anderson movies now, right? Oh, no, There Will Be Blood is your last.
Except for There Will Be Blood, which I'll watch before we do our next Director's Choice with The Master. Because I want to rewatch The Master, and I gotta watch There Will Be Blood. And then I'll have seen everything. So.
Okay.
Yeah, so.
Long episode. Woo.
Long episode. Woo, another one. Matt, what's our call to action? Where can we find our stuff?
Find us on YouTube, Spotify, iTunes, Podbean, all the places where you can watch podcasts. Comment, like, subscribe, comment for your film fraud as long as it's me. Let me know if you want a wrestling podcast because I'll gladly do it. Please.
No, please.
And next episode, throwing it to Tyler because it is part of his director series, which is Christopher Nolan.
It actually won't be our next episode. Our next episode is going to be the I'm Thinking of Ending Things. No, our next episode We got a few things coming up.
August.
Is our August recommendations. We're going to put that up. And then we have I'm Thinking of Ending Things. And then we have our Christopher Nolan Batman Begins Director's Choice, where we dissect Christopher Nolan, his impact on the superhero genre of Batman Begins in the movie, and how it's very adequate.
Mark's favorite director, Christopher Nolan.
Mark's
He's
favorite.
so excited for Tenet.
Yeah. I heard Tenet has horrible sound mixing. You can't hear half of the dialogue, so I can't wait.
I've heard a lot of things about Tenet.
Yeah, so have I.
The only reason I want to go see Tenet is because I want to see the Dune trailer.
Yeah. Yeah, so that's our next few episodes. Again, we're back to once a week. So that's it, guys. Any final comments?
No.
No.
No? All right. And thank you guys for watching. And I get the final word. Good.